Do you have a psychological condition that you think might have been caused by work, and you want to know if you have a workers' compensation case and if you should file it? We're talking about that right now. Hi, I'm Naomi from Gonzalez Law, empowering Californians through legal education. One of the questions I'm asked quite frequently is, can I have a workers' compensation case for an injury that is not physical but psychological? The answer is yes. If you have a psychological injury and you want to know if it's covered under workers' compensation, you should know that workers' compensation is different depending on if it's a physical injury or a psychological injury. For a physical injury, there's no requirement on time. It could be your very first day of work and you get injured, it's still covered under workers' compensation. For a psychological injury, there is a requirement on time. You have to have been working there for at least 6 months prior to your injury, the exception being if there was a sudden and extraordinary event. For example, your very first day of work, you're held up by gunpoint and now you have a psychological injury. That would qualify as sudden and extraordinary. For a physical injury, only 1% of your injury has to be caused by work to be covered under workers' compensation. For a psychological injury, over 50% of your injury has to be caused by work for it to be covered under workers' compensation. For a physical injury, it could be easier for an average person to recognize when they are injured. For psychological injury, it can be harder to tell if there's an injury. You might have certain feelings such as sadness, anger. You might feel a little stressed or anxious, depressed. But even if you have these feelings, it doesn't mean you have an actual diagnosable disorder. On the other hand, you might not have these feelings, but actually have a diagnosable disorder that you just don't recognize the symptoms. So do you have a workers' compensation case for psychological? Now, I made a video before about if you have a good workers' compensation case that does apply to psychological, but psychological has more to it than that. So the things you're going to be looking for in psychological are, 1, do you have an actual psychological injury? It's not just your feelings, but there's an actual diagnosable disorder of some sort. 2, is that injury caused by work? And not only is it caused by it, but is it over 50% caused by work? That's a pretty high threshold. And 3 is it barred by an affirmative defense? You have to be working there for at least 6 months before your injury occurs. The most common affirmative defense is the good faith personnel action. In that defense, if your injury is caused by work, but what caused your injury was actually personnel actions that were done in good faith, then your employer is not responsible for them. The easiest way to explain this is through this example. Let's say your employer has a 3 strikes you're out policy. The first strike, you have a verbal warning. The second strike, you have a verbal and written warning. And the third strike, you get terminated. Now, you are late for work and your boss is really mean about it. And he yells at you in front of everybody and says, how dare you be late? What is wrong with you? And maybe curses. Your feelings are hurt and you feel really bad about that. And then you're late again. And the second time, your boss not only does the same thing, yells at you again in the same way, but he gives you a written warning. Well, now you're starting to get scared. You get super stressed, super anxious. You're thinking, oh my gosh, if I'm late again, I'm going to get fired and I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. I won't be able to put food in my kids' mouths. And you are really stressed out about this. And then you're late again. This time your boss yells at you, brings you into the office, fires you, and sends you out the door with your box, and you have to do the walk of shame, walking all the way through the building, escorted by the security guard, and out the door. As a result of those actions, maybe you get an anxiety disorder, maybe you get depression. Your employer will bring up this affirmative defense as saying, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm so sorry you feel that way, but we were following our policies. We did the 3 strikes, you're out. You shouldn't have been late, so too bad, so sad. And that's a defense they're gonna bring up against you, pretty much guaranteed, if you're filing a psychological claim that has anything to do with personnel actions. So just because you could qualify for a workers' compensation case doesn't mean you should file it. Click on this video right here where I go through a lot of things to consider to deciding whether you should file a workers' compensation case or not. If you would like to talk to us about your case, go ahead and text this consult and we'll be very happy to talk to you. And don't forget to press like so more people can be empowered. Thank you. Bye.